Okay, here we go. Ah, welcome, all of you who are going to become new members. Um, welcome, all of you at home who are watching this on the live stream. Um, our bylaws require that we have an orientation for anyone who has not been a member of another church. If you've been a member of another unity church, you can actually skip this if you want, but you might. I think you'll enjoy it. We're just going to go over the the history, some of our basic beliefs, and just generally make it clear that you understand exactly what you're joining. Fair enough? Okay. Here, there are people who are passing around the sign-in list, so we know exactly who's coming in. If you were at home, how is this going to work? We're just going to have them write on the comments or something. You need to let us know at least your name. If you're willing to put your email address out there, that would be helpful too. But if not, we'll try to figure out how to get a hold of you. You'll need to send something in to us so that we have contact material for you. But in any case, thank you for joining with us at home, and thank you for being here. Okay. We're ready to go? Ready to go. The first thing we're going to do is go over Unity history. It's something you're probably familiar with. I mention it from time to time on Sunday mornings. If you've ever been to another Unity church at all, you've probably heard about it. But okay, we want to make sure you're up on it. Unity was originally founded in 1889. But what resulted in Unity's being founded were actually a couple of healings. Okay, the first and the major one is Myrtle Fillmore. Our two founders of Unity are Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. Okay, Myrtle had been diagnosed with tuberculosis during a period of time when that meant you were going to die. Okay. She was told she only had a couple of months to live at the time that she and Charles went to hear a Dr. Weeks, who was a speaker for the Emma Curtis Hopkins organization. Now, Emma Curtis Hopkins originally was with Mary Baker Eddy back a while, and then she split off and did her own thing. In either case, it comes out of New Thought, what we call New Thought. But in any case, they had this wonderful experience at this tent meeting, and Charles came out inspired, but Myrtle came out changed. Okay, he was like, "This is exciting. This is such a wonderful thing." But Myrtle heard this one thought in the middle of this that literally changed her life. She heard, "I am a child of God. Therefore, I do not inherit illness." The idea being that I only inherit perfect life from my Heavenly Father. And so she went home and said, "Wow, I've got to work with this." And she started concentrating on this idea of divine life inside of her body. Okay. She really did dedicate her life to meditating on divine life, meditating on healing, meditating on her divine inheritance. She said, "From my earthly parents, I inherited a weakness towards tuberculosis. Everyone in her family had died of tuberculosis. But from my heavenly Father, I inherit perfect health." And so she decided she needed to quit claiming her earthly inheritance and start claiming her heavenly inheritance. She concentrated on life. And essentially, it took 2 years. But remember, she was only given a couple of months. So anytime after the first couple of months, she's way ahead of the game, any way you cut it. But for quite a while, the body still felt sick. It still did not seem to respond. But she, in the book How to Let God Help You, she talks about how she worked with her healing, and she spoke to the centers of her body and told them they were filled with divine life until they finally responded. By the end of a 2-year concentration on this, she had her healing. She said, when the body was slow to respond, I did not become discouraged, but kept right on. I'd spent years telling it was weak and it was going to die of tuberculosis. So the fact that it took a little while, I was okay with that. Yeah. So here she is, 2 years later, she is tuberculosis free. Lived for another 40 years. Okay. And the interesting thing that I like to talk about is the fact that she spent so much inner concentration upon divine life that she didn't just get her healing. She essentially became a healer. She was so conversant in this energy that when she prayed with somebody, they got healed. What's intriguing is it took her 2 years to get her healing. But in the years after, she prayed with people and they would have instantaneous healings. Okay? And she said, no, I'm not doing it to you. It's just that I can see this, so when we join together in prayer, you can see it too, and this comes out of you. Well, of course, Charles, her husband, is elated. She was supposed to die, and instead she's back with the living, and very much with the living. And he decided, if she can do this, so can I. See, Charles, a very willful man, had fallen when he was 10 years old. And I don't know what he did, but he damaged his hip and his leg in such a way that it quit growing. So everything else continued to grow after he was 10, but not that leg, and it kind of shriveled up. So Charles got around on crutches. Now, I say a very willful man. This is someone who, one of his jobs was driving a mule team over the Colorado mountain passes on crutches. Okay. So I get that. But he said, listen, if you can solve tuberculosis, maybe I can grow this leg back out. Now, whereas Myrtle's healing took 2 years, which is why when people say, I meditated for a month and I still don't have my healing, I said, hang in there. You may need to do this for a while. But Charles hung in his entire life, okay? He meditated on healing life every day for the next 40 years. And in the process, he slowly but surely grew that leg out until it could hold weight, until it was only 1 to 2 inches shorter than the other one. He wore a double heel. And then he walked just like everybody else. Okay? So he got his healing. But for him, remember in the lesson a couple of weeks ago, I said, you've got to be in it for, quote, as long as it takes. And his commitment was, I'm in it for life, if that's what it needs to be. Charles also prayed with people, and many had healings through him. Together they founded an organization that is called Silent Unity. Okay? And Silent Unity was a gathering of people who would recognize that I am not the healer, but there is the Spirit within me that does the work. And if that's true, you didn't need Charles to pray. You didn't need Myrtle to pray. You needed anyone who was tapped into the gathered consciousness of silent unity. It was everyone who was willing to act as a servant of spirit. It started as servant of healing life, but then they worked with people on all kinds of things. Everything from love, relationships, to abundance. Charles took on abundance. He was a businessman, so he decided if I can heal my body, I ought to be able to heal my finances too. Okay? And I ought to be able to bring God into every aspect of my life and see some serious upgrades. Okay? So, in any case, I think it was 1889 when they founded Silent Unity. And it started with just a handful of people, but it grew. And they would all offer to pray with people in the name of Silent Unity, the gathered consciousness of those who believe in healing. Okay? Silent Unity, it turns out, is the longest continuous prayer organization in the world. Unity is just a little movement, but we've got some major credentials that don't get touted very often. I'm not sure we've gone any longer than some of the Tibetan monks have. But in the Western world, though there are other more famous prayer organizations, Silent Unity is the longest continuous prayer organization. And they have literally millions of healings under their belt. You know, people who called them for healing, people who called them for prayer support for whatever they're facing. And when I was in ministerial school, at that time, different ones of the students would get the opportunity to work in Silent Unity. And a friend of mine was in there. He was working in the letter writing section. At that time, it was letter. Now, I guess everything is email and etc. But in any case, he reported there were letters that would come back. He would send the letter out even for things he wasn't at all sure were possible, but his job was to just know it was and affirm it. And he said, I got this one letter back from a young girl who had 3/4 of her stomach removed. She could eat nothing solid, couldn't eat solid food at all, and she wanted a healing. And he said, someone just showed me the letter that came back. And she said she'd just eaten her first hamburger. He says, this one's even hard for me to believe. Okay, when spirit moves, anything is possible with God. And Silent Unity is about a gathering of people who are willing to know when spirit moves, anything is possible. That's what it's all about. There are over 1,000 churches these days. Unity didn't start out as a church. Originally, Charles Fillmore thought this new way to look at the scriptures, and he was known in his day as a Bible teacher, as a scriptural teacher. Anyone who could see the scriptures from this new point of view, he thought it would just seep into all of Christianity, and we were just part of the whole thing. But as traditional Christianity was slow to pick up on some of these things, even resistant in certain times, eventually people came to him and said, we want to have our own groups that get together and talk about it the way we see it and the way we understand it. And he finally okayed the idea of creating churches. Okay. And thus, Unity churches were founded. Originally, we considered ourselves non-denominational, but once you've got well over 1,000, in the thousands of churches, I think you become a denomination. So, there we are now. Worldwide, we're in lots of different countries. I said Unity had a bunch of firsts. We were the longest prayer organization. The Daily Word is the first of its kind. Everything else was patterned after it that came. The Methodist Church had one. Everybody had one when I was growing up in the 60s. They all have their little booklet. But Daily Word was the first one to have a daily prayer message put out in that format. When Oral Roberts was founding his movement, he came to Unity Village and toured. And rather than say, oh, we've got it and we don't want you to have it, it was like, here, everything's free for the taking. In Unity, it belongs to humanity. So basically, we took him through Silent Unity, showed him how the prayer organization would work, took him through Daily Word, showed him how to create that whole thing, and he went and he ran with it. So did a lot of other people. Because Charles was into science. You know, one of his last books that was put together was called Atom Smashing Power of Mind. More recently, Christianity and science have decided to team up. But in the early days, it was like science is no. You know, stay away from science, where we had no problem. So new technology was something that Charles and Myrtle in the early days were quite willing to embrace. So we were the first religious movement to use radio in a widespread way. We had, I don't know, I may have the numbers wrong, but it was like a 500,000 watt radio station, something they do not even license anymore. And Unity did everything. We made our own records. We, to the recordings. We and broadcast 24 hours a day. And there's an interesting story. In the 60s, now this is way much later, right? In the 60s, the Association of Unity Churches, which is now called Unity Worldwide, decided we're going to have a worldwide conference. We're going to invite people from these other countries that have one or two Unity churches and see if people will come, and we'll call it Unity Worldwide Conference. And they put out the word. And when people came for this conference, there was a very colorful delegation showed up from Nigeria. And the people in charge kind of whispered back and forth, I didn't know we had any churches in Nigeria. Well, they're right, they didn't know. What had happened is back in the 40s, the 30s and 40s, Papa Charlie, being somewhat of the rebel that he was at times, Charles Fillmore, at night, he'd turn up the gain and peg the needle on the radio station. He had this huge radio station, which we do not have anymore. Anyway, he'd turn that up. He was bouncing off the ionosphere. And they were picking him up all over the world. And in Nigeria, there were people who were picking up his radio broadcasts and literally founded Unity Nigeria while nobody had any idea this was going on. In the 60s, and maybe even earlier, Unity Inn, which is out at Unity Village. Unity Village, I need to back up and say Unity Village is the home base for the Unity movement. Now, they had a large swatch of land. Charles had been in real estate, so they got a large chunk of land outside of Kansas City. It's now in the Beltway. But at that time, it was outside of Unity Church. First, they called it Unity Farm, and they raised all kinds of fruits and vegetables, and then they built their administrative centers there and moved them from downtown Kansas City out to Unity Village. They incorporated as a village out in this farmland territory, so they thought, well, we won't have to deal with anybody else. We'll just deal with ourselves. We'll be our own village. So that's Unity Village. At Unity Village, they had an inn, a place to eat, a restaurant. And it was vegetarian for a very long time. Now, we tend to get ahead of the curve, and just about the time everybody catches up with us, we decide maybe we ought to abandon it. So the bottom line is we were a vegetarian inn for years. In fact, for years, there were not prices on the food. You just made a love offering on the way out. That's how it worked. Okay? So I arrived out there in 73 to go to ministerial school. Side point, I am one of the younger of the ordained Unity ministers in the movement throughout the history. There were a number of us, and a couple of them younger than I, but not by much. I was ordained when I was 23. I was 21 when I got out there. But in the 70s, maybe the latter 60s, they started incorporating meat entrees back in. So here we are in an era that followed, that concentrated on vegetarianism, came to the foreground. We'd been there. Been there, done that was sort of our attitude. And by the time I got there, they served both vegetarian entrees and meat entrees and so forth. So we've always been on the cutting edge, you might say, of where humanity and definitely Christianity was going. Now, we were a big publishing house for a very long time. Now what do you do when you give it off to someone else to do it? Now we outsource it. But we had the printing presses right on the village. While I was still there, they were still printing. In either case, so we print Daily Word, which has millions of copies that go around the world, into households with all sorts of, definitely all denominations of Christianity, and maybe beyond. You'll find it says Unity on it, but the big print is just Daily Word. You got to look for the small print to find that because they wanted it to be acceptable to everyone. The idea was this was for everybody and could go into every household. Unity Magazine is published, and it's gone through a number of changes through the year. There you'll find the articles on Unity thinking, and they published Unity books. Now, a great deal of Unity books was the Fillmore books. I was raised on Fillmore books. There are all kinds of books today. We were just talking. Pam Grout with E squared and E cubed and everybody and all kinds of other more current authors. But if you want to go back to the basics of Unity, you find that the basic Unity textbooks were written by Charles Fillmore, Myrtle Fillmore, and Emily Cady. Charles kind of wanted to go off into deeper things. So when they needed a basic textbook, they contracted with H. Emily Cady, a woman doctor who was very strong in the Unity movement at that point. And she wrote the book, Lessons in Truth. Not a terribly snazzy title, but it embodies the basics of the Unity approach. Fillmore wrote Talks on Truth, Keep It True Lent, Christian Healing, Atom Smashing Power of Mind, Mysteries of Genesis, Mysteries of John. You can go through, there's a whole list of them. I probably missed a couple of them in there. 12 Powers of Man. Or presently, the new book is 12 Powers. It includes the original 12 Powers of Man written by Charles and Christ Enthroned in Man written by Cora, his second wife, and which is kind of the workbook that goes with it, and they've put them in together. More recently, I think it was probably in the 90s, no, maybe in the 80s, that Richard and Mary Alice Jaffola were contracted to write a new textbook for Unity, and that one came out called The Quest. A textbook, a handbook, a teacher's guide, whatever. Yeah, okay. So anyway, if you want to delve into the basics, you want to grab, well, first, Lessons in Truth. But there is an awful lot of material in Charles Fillmore's books. They don't have snazzy titles. Talks on Truth, Keep a True Lent, Christian Healing. That's probably the best of the titles. Jesus Christ Heals, whatever. But I will warn you, the language is 100 years old. So you may be happier with current authors. But me, I was raised on the old stuff. So I understand where the thinking came from. So, enough of that. Unity today is very much worldwide. That's why they renamed it Unity Worldwide. And I see happening what Charles originally intended to happen. You will find that when I first started, we were thought of as very, very strange. But these days, people who leave a traditional traditional Christian church and walk into our place hear a different take, but it doesn't sound all that weird to them. Because quite frankly, the thoughts that we have embraced have moved into our societal understanding. The idea that you could hold a thought and it changes the world was radical in the beginning. And now you'll hear a truck driver at the gas station saying, well, hold a good thought from my favorite team. It's just accepted. Positive thinking is an accepted part. And quite frankly, psychology has picked up the banner. And a lot of cutting-edge Christian teaching has been picked up and put in a more generic form as psychology. So the bottom line is humanity is evolving into this type of thinking, any way you cut it. It's amazing how many, Joel Goldstein, right? Here he is running, and Norman Vincent Peale and all of those were in more traditional organizations. Goldstein, for a long time, his father, and he readily admitted in the latter years, they read everything Fillmore said, everything Fillmore wrote. They explored deeply into unity, and it colored some of the way that they taught. So, basically it has happened. But we still have unity churches where you can concentrate on the real depth of what spirituality means. So, let's talk about membership for a second. I've gotten carried away. Membership is a commitment to give to the group consciousness. What you are giving is yourself, your consciousness, your presence, your awareness. But also, it's a commitment to receive from the group consciousness. You tune in and you can feel the energy of the gathered group. Ronnie this morning was talking about group consciousness, right? The power that's generated when people gather together. There is a mystical power to be touched That's why churches in general were formed. Okay? Now, how can you serve the church as a member? With your financial support, with your attendance, and volunteering to help. Owning the church. If you see something needs to be done, consider the one who might make it happen. You know, you might want to talk to a few people first, but the bottom line is it's your church. I've always said a church is the people, not the minister, not the organization. It's the gathering of people. So along that line, one of the ways you can serve the church is by bringing your friends, exposing them to unity also. And if they go for it, that's wonderful. We do not chase people down. You either like us or you don't. And we're perfectly happy for you to go down the street and find a place where you feel like you fit in better. But if you feel like this is it, we're perfectly willing to say this is home for you too. How do you receive the most from your membership? Well, attend on Sunday service. Please don't join and then just let us never see you again. Attend classes and activities because there's more going on than just on Sundays. Make friends with people in the church because that social support is important. And call us for prayer support. We're not so evolved that we know to pray for you before you ask. Now, God knows your need, and we can surround everyone in light. But if you're having a problem, call us. Let the prayer chaplain start praying for you. Be on the prayer list. Know that the group consciousness is behind you in whatever it is you're facing. And if you're feeling weak, think of all those who are gathered here. We're part of you. Tap in and feel the strength. Let's talk about unity beliefs for a second. I suppose what sets us aside from traditional Christianity is we talk a great deal about the Christ within you. The Christ within. We talk a great deal about the idea that we are sons and daughters of God. Your soul is a child of God. And that's what's at the center of who you are. If you walk into a traditional church and ask, are you a child of God or a worm of the dust? Most of them will reply, we're a worm of the dust. You walk into a unity church and you ask, are you a worm of the dust or a child of God? They'll say a child of God. And what I'll tell you is, you're both. It just depends on your perspective. Your soul is a child of God. This outer human self, it's going to fall away. It's of the earth. So in the end, we are really not at odds with traditional Christianity. We're just emphasizing the other side of the equation. Traditional Christianity will concentrate on disciplining the human self. We will concentrate on awakening the higher self, the child of God that's inside of you. The role that Jesus plays, Jesus is the master teacher. In a moment, I'm going to talk about that again. You're a disciple of Jesus Christ if you're in unity. Unity is firmly in the Christian camp. Whether the rest of Christianity likes us or not doesn't really matter. We're firmly there. We believe that God moves through everyone and everything. And that's why we say truth is where you find it. And we have no problem looking into Far Eastern religion and things like that and finding this tremendous sense of truth that is there. But we follow the path laid out by Jesus Christ. You got to follow a path. And that's the path we follow. The Bible is our basic textbook. But we interpret it metaphysically. I'll go head to head with any of the Bible pushers. As far as I'm concerned, this is the recording of the teaching of the greatest spiritual being that ever graced the planet. And he is teaching his disciples how to enter into the kingdom of the heavens, how to function in the higher realms right here, right now. But when he taught, all he had was a physical language, a language that was steeped in the earth realm to teach with. So he taught often in parables. He often said something or used 3 examples in a row so that you would understand that it wasn't the 3 examples that was important. It was what tied them together he was trying to teach you. This is one principle. This is an expression of it. This is an expression of it. That's an expression of it. Therefore, if you try to sit and say, well, there were 3 rules there. No, there weren't. There's one principle. And it affects all those areas. He just gave you some examples. So to me, and I know there are people who would hang me from the highest yardarm for this one, but as far as I'm concerned, to say I take the Bible literally, which means I take the wording physically, it's just like shooting yourself in the foot. He is describing something that is totally non-physical. But he only has physical terms to use. I'm not saying there isn't meaning in the literal context, but I'm saying to limit yourself to that. The Bible has so many levels of truth to convey. The symbolism of the stories is amazing. It talks about what each of us faces in an inner experience of trying to awaken spiritually. To put it down to a bunch of physical rules and regs is to demean the book as far as I'm concerned. We teach that you are directly connected to God. You don't go through anyone else. Say, oh, I go through Jesus. No, you follow Jesus, who said, I go to my God and your God, my Father and your Father. He expected us to have exactly the same relationship with God that he demonstrated. And if you're a true disciple, that's what you're striving for. So, we believe that you're directly connected to God, and thus there's a heavy emphasis on prayer and meditation, where you spend time in God's presence. We believe in the creative power of thoughts and words and feelings. Basically, we believe that what you radiate into life is what you're going to get back out of life. You know, this is nothing radical. I mean, we've said this in humanity for years, right? What goes around comes around. Laugh and the world laughs with you, is that it? Cry and you cry alone? All these are expressions of what you radiate is what you get back. It's pretty straightforward. Thus, you'll find that in unity, we are not so much about a lot of outer rules and regs. We're about inner. Jesus in several of his times taught that, if you do the outer, it's not enough. You're inner. What? He who looks at a woman with lust in his eyes has already committed adultery. Well, he didn't do a thing. It's not the action, but it is your thought processes. The inner world is actually more important than the outer, because if you discipline your inner world and set your inner world to follow Jesus' teaching, I will not have to tell you, if you are steeping yourself in a consciousness of love, not to kill your neighbor. It just doesn't happen if you're in a consciousness of love. So we work on the inner consciousness that Jesus taught, knowing outer morality will take care of itself. If you only follow the outer rules, it's not all who call Lord, Lord who will enter into the kingdom of heaven. Basically, the outer rules aren't going to be enough. You can't just verbalize it. And I commend you for amending your behavior. But in unity, you haven't done it until you've worked with your inner world and got it straight inside here. So, we believe there is only one power. We're not into putting the devil on par with God. I'm sorry. That's just downright dumb. There is one presence and one power in the universe. God the good, omnipotent. You say, but what about Satan and evil? There is such stuff, but it's not on par with God. It's not even a fallen angel. This is the gathered disharmony of human thinking from over the centuries and millennium. It's humanity that created evil. It's not an adversary that's jousting with God. And if we created it, we can abandon it also. That's why we say you don't have to beat the tar out of evil. You just have to turn on the light. If you turn on the light, there is no darkness. Humanity created shadow. We create thought forms that block out the realization that God is there. The moment you know God is there, the shadow is dispelled. So, we're not in to wrestling with evil. Jesus said, don't do that. How'd that one go? Resist not evil. Yeah, resist not evil. Don't wrestle with evil on evil's level. Embrace the light. That's where we go. Okay. So, is there a devil? Yes and no. In reality, no. For us, in human consciousness, yeah, we can encounter all this gathered thousands of years of negativity. And it can at times, to some of us, seem almost anthropomorphic, almost like it takes on a life of its own. But it's only shadow. And if we know that, and know there is only God, or as Joshua said, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. If you put your mental energy on evil, you are serving the darkness. Okay. As we awaken spiritually, you'll find that spiritual powers awaken within you. Telepathy, all kinds of things. We are much more than we know we are. And it'll start to awaken. Divine order suggests that you can never find yourself in a place where God is not. And the moment you know that, the moment you know there is some order here, whether you see it or not, things begin to change. There's divine mind in every atom and even in the vacuum. The presence of God is everywhere present. There is no place where it is missing. We live and move and have our being within a sea of God life, God presence, God love. It pervades everything. Therefore, we say God is omnipresent. If you want to get precise, we say God is omnipresence. God is omniscience, all mind, divine mind. You can have no thoughts outside of divine mind. You can do weird things with them within divine mind. But there's only one mind. An omnipotence, all the power in the world, is God. Can we do weird things with it? Hey, that's what free choice is all about. You can be out of harmony if you choose to. Because the way it is, when you're out of harmony, you create pain. And eventually you wake up and say, I don't want to do this anymore. I just don't want to be there. Being out of harmony will always lead you back, eventually, into being in harmony. It just depends on how much pain you can take. Okay. In everyday unity principles, what you've got within radiates out, so what you hold in your heart is what you're going to create in your world. Therefore, you're going to have to know that God is your source of abundance if you want to demonstrate prosperity. You also have to understand that what you give is what you receive, whether we're talking mentally, emotionally, or physically. Okay, it works on all levels. So consequently, we'll talk about, as children of God, we're meant to prosper. Let's get over this feeling guilty about wanting good things in life. God wants for you your highest good. The power of mind. Your mind is what creates your life. Therefore, we want to control what we're radiating a little more, rather than just turn it loose to radiate all kinds of negativity and then wonder why things start looking a little dark in our lives. Tithing we teach because we know as you give, so does it return to you, multiplied over. That's the way it works. An excellent tool in the area of prosperity. Let's talk about heaven and hell. Here's once again where we shy away. These are not locations. They're states of mind. And you can be in hell while you're right here. And you can be in heaven while you're right here. And yes, when we die and move on to other dimensions of life, you can do the heaven and you can do the hell there too. Eternal damnation, I never believed that one. When I was raised as a Methodist, I could not understand why a loving God would suddenly, after a few years with people not really understanding the rules well, say, forget about you, burn forever. Somehow that just didn't sound loving to me. So as a 6-year-old, I remember hearing this and going, well, that ain't true. And I've never disagreed with that assessment. Quick story. I started my ministerial career in Miami as the assistant minister there. And there was a lady the bookstore was in the foyer, and, lots of people would come through and look. And there was a lady who ran the bookstore, told the story of a friend of hers who came to Unity for like a year. and really liked us, and then all of a sudden told her friend, I can't come there anymore. She says, why? She said, because I just figured out you people don't believe in hell. And I try really hard to be good. And I got to know that the rest of them who aren't trying as hard as I am are going to hell. Oh, that'll get you to heaven. Anyway. The higher realms are probably more benevolent than we realize. I have a connection to the other side, and I tell you it's wonderful. But I do understand you can probably, everything that can be held in mind is someplace within mind. When people say, is possession real? Is this real? Is that real? And they stock these really negative, scary things. I have to say it's not real in my world. It's not real from the level I live at. Hell is just sinking down into an amazingly dark level. And heaven is rising out of that darkness and realizing I'm a child of God. I belong in the light. And for me, it can be as simple as that. In unity, we believe in freedom. You are responsible for your inner kingdom. That means you don't take everything just because I say it. We accept that unity is where you find it. So we have feed-ins from everywhere. We don't mind if somebody of another religion said it. If it smacks of truth, it's truth. And you'll find many people in unity believe in reincarnation. It's not a requirement. But many people do. A lot of people will tell you, and I remember thinking exactly this, that it's amazingly unfair that you only get 80 years or so, and then that's it for eternity. It merely suggests that if you fail, you get another try. That's what's going on. You are a spiritual being. In this day and age, now I'm going to digress for a second and say that in the coming years, I believe that the spiritual awakening that humanity will go through, the one carrying the flag may very well be quantum physics. Because the further physics goes, the more it sounds like the spirituality that we teach. They start talking in terms of realities, not one set physical thing, but possibilities of which we choose on a mental level that we don't yet understand. So, if you start talking about what happens after you die, I like reincarnation. It's the best model that I can use at this time. If you want to use heaven and hell, go for it. If you want to use that souls progress through different planets, go for it. I really don't care what you choose because I'm pretty sure all of the models are not exactly accurate. I think what's going down is bigger than this human mind can embrace. So we've got to embrace something, an ideal that works for us. You know, people believe the further you go spiritually, the more you'll know. My experience has been the further you go, the more you know what you don't know. Not the more you think you've got the world by the tail. In the early stages, you think you get the world by the tail. So I got to tell you, when it comes to what happens after we die, I mentioned a moment ago, I have a really strong connection to the other side. At times, I have jokingly said I'm one of the guardians on this side of the river Styx. And I will tell you over and over, death is not the enemy. It's the reward for having finished. Consequently, they say, well then, what's happening on the other side? Say, I don't know. All I need to know is God is with me now, and God is with me then, and all is well. But I can tell you what I feel from the other side. It's phenomenal. It's beyond anything we can imagine. And you're all children of God. You all deserve the best God has to give you. So, I'm going to try to wrap this up. Linda says, please. Anyway, here we go. How do you relate to other Christians? It's not as bad these days as it used to be. As I said, everybody's kind of coming along. It's amazing. But it used to be I needed to give this part of the lecture. Because even today, you can probably find someone who will tell you that, oh my God, you're part of that unity cult? And they think it's something terrible. We are, in the end, the very liberal end of Christianity. The Baptist Church, the Church of God, they're the very conservative end. Okay, so we're two ends of the same spectrum. Traditional churches will often tell you they have the only way, and if you're not in their sect, you ain't making it. And we'll say, God has provided an infinite number of ways up. We have a way up, but we won't tell you we've got the only way. We already did miserable sinners versus child of God. When someone says, do you know that you're a miserable sinner? You say, yes, I know I'm a child of God. Do I think Jesus died for my sins? You don't want to hear what I think about that. Actually, maybe you do. That is the most desecration I've ever heard of. A God that has to have a blood sacrifice in order to let me off the hook? That isn't what went down. Jesus demonstrated that life is eternal. Did he get killed in the process, his body? Yeah. And then he showed it was no big deal, right? He came and he walked with people, he ate fish, he did all kinds of things. So, how do you relate to people who do believe that? People say, do you believe that Jesus died for our sins? I usually respond, I believe Jesus lived to lift us out of sin. Are you saved? Just say yes. What they mean is, are you following Jesus Christ? I usually end up saying, I am a disciple of Jesus Christ, because I can say that firmly, I can say it clearly. And most of them won't give you a hard time over that. It doesn't sound familiar to them, but okay. Do you believe in the Trinity? Please say yes. We just define it a little differently. No, like that movie that came out that showed 3 people running around and they were all God. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. No. Yes, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They are 3 ways to experience Spirit. Spirit, the one Spirit that moves through all of life. Mind, idea, and expression. There's another version. I'm trying to remember what that was. So we believe in the Trinity. We just happen to put a little more definition behind it than they do, and we don't leave it three little people running around. Then they ask if you were washed in the blood and he died for our sins. And yes, that's a difficult one, and I addressed it a moment ago. They're usually willing to accept it when I say, I believe he lived in order to show me how to rise above it all. Don't argue with a fundamentalist. It won't accomplish anything. The truth is, their faith depends upon believing that their particular way that they look at it is the only way. It's very brittle. And if you have an argument and you actually make any points, you shake their faith. And it isn't worth it. We, on the other hand, know the truth is where you find it. You can say that there are lots of different perspectives. And so this person can say all kinds of stuff and it doesn't shake my faith at all. It just doesn't touch me. Because my faith's on a whole different level. We're not doing anybody any favors. There is no battle to be won. Find areas you can agree on and go forward. Do the translation, okay? Most of us were somewhere else before we came to unity. We're the ones who ought to be able to do the translation. This goes off with unity as practical Christianity. Practical Christianity. What that means is, it's not just pie in the sky. Your Christian principles as taught within this unity structure should help you improve your life. They should help you uncover the spiritual self within you that is so majestic compared to who we have thought ourselves to be. And following these spiritual objectives should help lift the consciousness of the world. That's why we're here. To lift all of humanity. Not by battering them into submission, but by demonstrating the glory of God in our lives so that everyone aspires to that. That's how you lift humanity. One last thing I'm going to talk about are the unity wings. It's our symbol. They were trying to come up with a logo, a symbol years ago, and Charles Fillmore went into meditation. He used to talk about going to headquarters. I'm going to talk about that in a few weeks. He went to headquarters. And when he came out, he said, I know what our symbol should be. It's a circle with wings on the side. It is the world uplifted on wings of spirit. Or in Revelation, the new heaven and the new earth. That's our symbol. You won't find crosses very often in unity. The cross is the suffering of the human self as it tries to let go. We're rather looking at the uplifting of the spiritual side of life. So, if I haven't offended you too badly, maybe you're still coming in as new members next week. And you just had the most intense unity class you're going to get for a while. Okay. So anyway, we are very proud to have each and every one of you come in as a member of Unity Orlando. We are all one We're working to lift the world. It seems to be a slow process, but our souls think in terms of thousands of years. We think in only 100. That's why it looks so discouraging. Our souls are here for the long run. We're here to lift humanity to a higher level. We're here to create a world uplifted on wings of spirit. Any questions? You think I've kept you long enough, don't you? Next week, we will have our new member experience, and we'll ask you to come to the front, if you're here. If you're at home, your name will be called, okay? Because we know you can't be here. But as you call your name, you'll come up, you'll get your certificate, and you'll line up here all looking forward toward me. And then you'll turn around so that everyone out there can see you. Okay? You only have to look at the group for a few seconds. We're then going to have you close your eyes, and from there on, you're just receiving your blessing as the congregation then blesses you. Okay? It's not that hard. We're hoping it'll be a wonderful experience for you. Are you coming to the 9:15 or the 11 a.m.? You'll need to let Linda know. They're all 11 at this point? Okay, that's fine. We'll be doing online at 9:15. And we're probably going to read everyone's name at both services. Okay? So that's the way we'll go. I don't know how to end this. We're done, right?